Hi everyone, this week I want to talk to you about something called the May flower gap. And if you're a flower farmer, you might know all about this. It's a time over here in the UK where you might find that you've not got as many flowers as other times in the growing season. And if you are a gardener, you might find that it's just not that colourful at that point in time in your gardens either. You've got an abundance of spring flowers in late March and April, all those lovely narcissi and tulips, muscari, hyacinths, ranunculus and anemones, and then they start to tail away in mid-May. And at that point in time, you might find that you're sowing lots of seeds and you've got lots of seedlings that you're bringing on, but you haven't got any flowers yet. So it can look rather green in the garden. And if you're a flower farmer and you're needing lots of flowers for cutting for florists or weddings or for local bunches, then it can be quite tricky to find enough to keep you going. And when I first started flower growing, it really was an uphill learning curve, and I actually didn't end up getting any flowers until August, the first year that I grew flowers, because I just sowed my seeds far too late. And then every year, gradually, I started to get more flowers. I ended up with my spring flowers, and then I'd have my summer ones, but I always had this period of time in May where I didn't have very much. And I'd have lots of people wanting to get married in May as well. It's a lovely time of year to get married. And yet these flowers are really difficult to come by in the garden. So what can you do? What have I learned over the last few years? Well, I've learned that the best way to approach it is in 3 stages. So you have to look at 3 different types of plants in your garden, and hopefully from all of these 3 different kinds, you'll get enough to cut from. And in front of me here, I have got what are called biennials. Now, these are seeds which you sow now in June, and they won't flower this year. They'll flower next May for you. So they are just growing away now. I sowed these early June. You can see here, this is a tray I have got of Sweet William, and I have also got Hesperus in here. And in this little tray here, I have got some Honesty. And these are all biennials. So they're looking really nice, healthy plants just now. They're putting down lots of roots and growing on to be strong little plants. And I'll look after them here in the greenhouse for the next several weeks and then start to harden them off. And in August, I will start to plant them out in the garden. If you're a bit further south in England and it's milder for longer, you can plant them out in September time. And these will overwinter nicely in the garden. They'll have got quite strong and put lots of roots down, so they should survive whatever the winter throws at them. And then as soon as they get a little warmth in the springtime next year, they'll get kick-started into growth and they'll produce nice early flowers in May for you. Some of your biennials include things like your foxgloves, your wallflowers, your dianthus and Sweet William, your Honesty, your Hesperus, otherwise known as Sweet Rocket. Those are some of the examples of ones that I grow. So you can go and buy these seed packets now and sow them just now and get the little plants going, and then August, September time you can plant them out in your garden, and that will definitely give you some May, early June colour next year. The nice thing about some of these other flowers that are biennials that we will see flowering next year is that they can give us different things at different times of the year. So although they will flower in May and June for us, with the Honesty you'll get magnificent seed pods after that, which you can use. The Sweet Rocket, the Hesperus here, if you cut it back after that first flush of flowers, you might get another flush of flowers later on in September time, which can be really useful then as well. One of the main things I would say about the biennials is that once you've raised them into nice little plants, make sure that if you're in Scotland you plant them out in good enough time. I normally try and get these out into the garden when the kids have gone back to school in August, and that means that they get a good several weeks of being able to bed in and grow some good healthy roots before those first frosts. If you're in England, it would be able to be slightly later. You can maybe get away with planting them in your garden in September. And that's the same with the hardy annual seeds as well. If I am sowing them, I really need to get them going in August and not wait till September, because that's a bit too late in Scotland for getting them going. So what else can you do to avoid the Mayflower gap? Well, for me, it is planting perennials. and it's choosing the right kind of ones that are going to flower for you in early May and also be hard enough to cope with whatever weather May throws at us, which can be very different in Scotland. It can be really nice and sunny, or else it can be really cold, wet and windy. Over the last few years, the repeat performers for me in May have been some perennials like Astrantia, Jacob's Ladder, alliums, Aqualesia. These are all great. They do really well for me and they keep coming back every year. So those are what I would recommend for looking at if you're wanting to plant some perennials. Another thing that you can also plant in the autumn time is alliums, and these bulbs are fantastic because you can buy different types of allium bulbs. You don't have to get the same one. You can buy a few of a different variety and then they will flower at different times, so you'll have a continuous run of alliums well into the summer, which is great as well because they give some really nice structure in your garden or in bouquets. So for the perennials, you can either sow them from seed. If you sow them from seed, it might take a couple of years for them to flower. Some perennials will flower for you well the first year if you get them going and grow them into strong little plants. Some perennials are easier to grow from seed than others. The Aqualesia for me this year has been really easy, the Astrantia not so much so. Sometimes if you have sowed a batch of seeds and you don't think anything is happening, especially with perennials, it's worth just putting them outside and leaving them to it. And sometimes you can come back and you'll find that they've germinated without you actually having done anything with them at all. So you can grow your perennials from seed. It might take a couple of years for them to flower, next year maybe if you're lucky, but it can be done. And it's also quite an economical way of getting new plants into your garden if you've raised them from seed yourself. But you can buy plants as well, and that's absolutely fine, or else divide up some clumps of Astrantia that you might already have in the garden and make new plants from that. The third thing that does well for me in May, if I get a good head start on it, is sowing hardy annual seeds in the autumn. And I overwinter these and I plant them out in the early springtime, and then they start to produce flowers for me in late May and early June. And this is quite a tricky one. It's probably the hardest of all. The perennials work really well, the biennials work really well, but the hardy annuals is the trickiest bit. They don't mind a bit of cold, they will put roots down over the winter time, but it does depend on what kind of winter we have, and sometimes it is a bit of potluck. Some years I'll get a lot of hardy annuals through, other years I won't, and sometimes it does vary which hardy annuals make it and which ones don't as well. So for example, this year I've managed to get corn cockles through the winter and they are flowering now, cornflowers as well. Amimantus and Nigella, they've all been great for me. They were all planted at the end of August last year and they have done great so far for me. And then the other hardy annuals, you keep sowing them more throughout February, March and April, and that'll just give you that succession of them throughout the summer for you as well. So you don't want to just plant them in the autumn, get a few weeks of them and then nothing else. You need to make sure that you then sow more hardy annual seeds in the springtime so that you'll get them right through the summer. So I'll do a video in August, September time when I am sowing these hardy annuals, and we'll talk again about that then. In terms of bulbs as well and corms, I find that if I plant some ranunculus and anemones in January, February time and then plant them outside in the garden, I can get a good crop of these outside in May as well. So you can plant them in autumn and they will flower earlier for you in April and early May. But if you want a slightly later crop before it gets too hot, then you can plant some in January, February time, and that should help as well with some May flowers for you. Same with tulips as well. If you plant the late flowering varieties of tulips, then they may well go into May for you as well. Sometimes they come on awful quickly if we've had a lot of sunny hot weather, but if it's been cooler, then they may well last into the second, even the third week in May if we're lucky. Thanks for watching this week's video. I hope you have found it helpful so that you can get more flowers in that May gap next year in your garden, or if you're a flower farmer, you'll have a bit more to choose from for cutting. It's certainly something that I learn more and more about every year, and it's nice being able to start to see that I can get enough flowers in May if I use a few different approaches.